Hey guys, DMS here. Today it's two budget tube amps head to head. Let's get into it. Now do me a favor, if you want to see more videos like this, click that subscribe button down below. If you want to support the channel and ask me questions directly, you can on the Telegram chat, or you can get active in the community on Hi-Fi Guides. So here's the two amps. This is the Little Dot Mark II. I've recommended it many times, and this is the Dark Voice 336 SE. Now, I have used both of these amps a fair bit with the stock tubes, and I've tube rolled both amps. Right now, with their rolled tubes in, we're going to talk about these amps, how they compare, what tubes I liked with them, which one you should get, obviously one costs more than the other, and in what cases they'll pair better with different headphones. For today's example, I'm going to be talking about a variety of things, but for the most part, I'm going to stick to the 560S and the HD6XX, which will also represent the HD600 and HD650. So right off the bat, I've recommended the Little Dot Mark II before, especially with the 6XX. I find that right out of the box, it widens the soundstage just a little bit and adds maybe a little bit of upper treble to it. And like many tube amps do, it kind of smooths over a little bit of the sound, makes it more pleasing. The Dark Voice right out of the box is much wider with 6XX than a lot of other amps are. It immediately widens out the soundstage. You lose a little bit of intimacy, but what you gain is a sense of space the 6XX doesn't normally have. It doesn't seem to add any energy in the upper treble. It focuses mostly on the mid-range with the stock tubes, and that mid-range becomes even more lush. The Dark Voice takes the tube magic of the Little Dot and turns it up a notch. But which one is best for you really does kind of go back and forth. The Dark Voice is more expensive, and likewise tube rolling it is also, generally speaking, more expensive unless you find a really good deal. If we're talking about the stock tubes, the Little Dot does make less power, and the Little Dot is probably a little bit easier to digest for some. So if you are coming straight into this and you just want to plug and play and not do anything else, and you want just a slight change, a slight difference with a little bit of that tube sound, the Little Dot makes perfect sense. And if you want something a little bit more heavier, if you're a little bit more seasoned in some audio, the Dark Voice does give you a bit more of that magic, but the stock tubes are really mid-range focused. And you have to be willing to accept the fact that if you get the Dark Voice, you're probably going to be tube rolling it. The Little Dot, you can get away with using the stock tubes, though I do personally believe it drastically improves it. You can get away with the stock ones just fine. The Dark Voice truthfully needs it. Now, the Dark Voice also has a quirk with tube rolling. With a lot of new old stock tubes, the Dark Voice requires a longer burn-in period. Now, the reason for this is because the Dark Voice was made for non-US markets that run off a higher voltage, and when converted to 120 volts for US markets, they used apparently a slightly cheaper transformer, so the voltage isn't exactly what it should be in the tubes, and the preamp tube can buzz. Now, the solution for that is to take the power tube right out, put in your new preamp tube, flip it on, and let it sit for a couple days. It doesn't get nearly as hot because the power tube is what generates most of the heat. I wouldn't like put it under a bundle of paper towels or anything, but I did that and it worked fine. It took about 3 days for this tongue sole preamp tube to stop buzzing and kind of warm up to how it's supposed to sound. Now, there is a modification you can do with 2 capacitors soldered in that fixes this completely. However, it does add more gain to the amp, and as we're about to discuss, the Dark Voice does have more power, but the thing is that I really think if you're using the Dark Voice with something like a 6XX or anything from ZMF or a 560S, with most headphones, honestly, that are high impedance and will take advantage of the Dark Voice's both sound and power, you really have to put it on some sort of DAC that you can turn down the volume on. I'm using both of these with the Socrus 1321, which has a basically a little pre on the front. You control what the DAC's output is. This is a R2R DAC, actually one of my favorite R2R DACs that you can buy, at least at its price point. There are some R2R DACs I like that are a lot more expensive, but this thing is pretty reasonable. I got this one from Modhouse Audio. I'll put a link to it in the video description if you want to check it out. I should also mention both these amps will be linked as well. But the Dark Voice, if you just run it straight out of something like a D90, it is loud. Like, you can just barely turn up the volume before it is just way too much power for either of these headphones. So I highly recommend running a DAC that you can lower the output of. That way you can really kind of give this a little bit of volume without having to obliterate your headphones. I'm not much of a loud listener myself, and I found that was completely necessary. A little bit less so on the Little Dot Mark II because the Little Dot doesn't have nearly as much gain. In the Little Dot, you can actually change the gain settings inside. There's dip switches you can mess with. Now, neither of these amps excels with low impedance headphones. I plugged up planars to both, and while it sounds really good at low volume, you can't turn either up much with a planar before you start getting distortion, which is kind of to be expected with tube amps like this. So if you plan to use either of these with a planar, just know you're not going to get much volume. You will, however, get a very pleasing sound. Now, tube rolling both of these amps. Let's talk about the Little Dot Mark II first. I changed these preamp tubes out for some tubes I'll link below. I got them on Amazon. And the first thing I noticed was that the bass was significantly better than it was before. Not warmer, but better, more impact, more punch, but without being more pronounced in that region. It didn't sound like it was boosted at all. In fact, this amp doesn't sound particularly warm. If anything, I would say with a tube upgrade, the Little Dot Mark II gets a bit brighter, but not bright in a way that is painful. In fact, the Little Dot Mark II is the opposite. With a tube roll, the Little Dot Mark II is an amp that feels a bit brighter in the treble, but never sibilant. It's very even, it's very smooth, brighter treble. And very resolving in that, which is interesting. Normally you think of something becoming brighter and you think of it being kind of sharp, more fatiguing, hard to listen to, but this does the exact opposite. And I found that with the 560S, it actually was a pretty amazing pairing. You end up with a lot of treble, but it's a lot of very, very buttery, smooth treble. Instead of things becoming sibilant or harsh, I feel like it kind of makes things sizzle and roll. And actually, I feel like it makes the 560S a bit smoother on top as well. This was an interesting effect when I used the HD 6XX on it, but truth be told, I actually preferred the 6XX on the Dark Voice and on the tube-rolled Dark Voice especially. So I'll list these tubes on screen. This is an RCA power tube and a Tongue Sol Pre. The RCA was made in America, the Tongue Sol was made in Russia. And with this combo, the 6XX gets, as crazy as it sounds, substantially warmer. It's already a very warm headphone, but not in a bloated and unpleasant way. It's more of a greater warmth and a timbre characteristic. Things like vocals or the guitar and Jeff Buckley singing Hallelujah are just so rich and full. It's a sort of richness and fullness that you really can't get outside of tubes, I feel like. And it did the same with the 560S, though I feel like the Little Dot Mark II, while not as warm, seems to have more bass impact. It's a bit sharper, it's a little bit more articulated in some parts of the response, but I feel like the Dark Voice just has the capable of flying higher. And really, I think that's kind of what this is going to boil down to. The Little Dot Mark II is the kind of amp you buy it and you use it just as it is, or you buy it and you swap in one set of tubes and you're done. I feel like the Dark Voice is the amp you buy when you want to really kind of invest more in some nicer tubes, but you don't want to go with like a crazy like $1,000 tube amp. You just get this, you start tube rolling with nicer tubes, and you really dig deep into that mid-range and the resolution that you can pull and the warmth out of some really cool old stock tubes. To be honest, it's really hard for me to decide between these two amps if I really had to pick one. I guess it would be the Dark Voice, but that's just because I know I could tinker with it more. If I just wanted to set one up and not worry about it and just use it, the Little Dot Mark II makes more sense. And the Little Dot is definitely cheaper. You get a lot more tube selection though with the Dark Voice. I really think getting me to pick between two tube amps is an impossible task. Okay, I need to get this video edited, need to get it up. I think I'm gonna cut it there and just say that I really recommend both of these amps, but I hope this kind of helps you to understand in which circumstances one might be better than the other for you. The Dark Voice flies high, you'll have to tube roll some, but you can really find some great combinations. You'll end up with more tubes, a lot of power, you definitely need to have a DAC that lets you reduce the volume, adds more soundstage. The Little Dot Mark II, easier to just kind of plug and play. Less tube selection, but it sounds pretty great. A little bit brighter, but very, very smooth. Doesn't add too much soundstage, but adds a little bit. More intimate sounding. And less gain, so you don't have to have a DAC that can reduce the input to it. And the Little Dot's a little bit cheaper. Either way, I love both of them. I think that's going to wrap this up. If you have questions, let me know in the comments. Maybe I'll touch up on this more and talk about how these sound with more headphones. Either way, I'm gonna get this video wrapped up, gonna get it edited, gonna get it uploaded, and I'll see you guys when it goes live. But that's all I have for you guys today. If you like this video, please leave a like down below, a comment letting me know what you want to see in the future. If you want to get active in the community, you can at forum.hifiguides.com. And as always, don't forget to stick around and subscribe for more videos like this in the future. Until the next one, guys. Peace.